The shotgun blast echoed through the dusty Texas valley as Amara Johnson stood over the bleeding raider, her wedding dress still stained with dirt from yesterday's ceremony. "You want to burn my home?" she hissed, pumping another shell into the chamber. "You'll have to go through me first." Behind her, Cole Walker, the cowboy who'd lost her hand in marriage over a rigged poker game, stared in shock at the woman he'd thought was just another burden. Friends, this is a story about how one crooked bet changed everything. Stick around till the end and drop a comment about where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this tale has traveled. The Golden Spur Saloon reeked of tobacco sweat and broken dreams on that fateful October night in 1882. Cole Walker pushed through the swinging doors, his spurs jangling against the warped floorboards, each step heavier than the last. 3 months without rain had turned his cattle ranch into a graveyard of dust and bones. The few steers that survived were worth less than the cost of feeding them. His last $20 borrowed against land he could barely hold on to, burned in his pocket like a brand. "Well, well, if it isn't Cole Walker," called out Vince Snake Eyes Sullivan from the corner table where smoke hung thick as morning fog. The gambler's silk vest caught the lamplight pristine and mocking against Cole's trail-worn leather. "Heard your ranch is drier than a temperance lady's liquor cabinet." Cole's jaw tightened. "Just here for a drink, Sullivan." "Come now, Walker. One hand." "What's $20 to a man who used to run 500 head?" Sullivan's pale fingers danced across a fresh deck of cards, the motion hypnotic as a rattler's sway. "Unless you're afraid," the other men at the table. Banker Samuel Blackwood, with his waxed mustache and 2 hired guns Cole didn't recognize, chuckled in that low, dangerous way that made smart men walk away. But Cole Walker had never been accused of being smart. Pride had always been his weakness, and Sullivan knew exactly where to strike. "Deal," Cole growled, pulling out a chair that groaned under his weight. The first hand went to Cole 3 queens, beating Sullivan's 2 pairs. The second hand Cole took with a straight. His 20 had become 40, then 80. The whiskey Sullivan kept pouring tasted like liquid courage, warming his belly and clouding his judgment just enough to keep him in his seat. "Lady Luck's dancing with you tonight," Sullivan observed, his snake eyes never leaving Cole's face. "But she's a fickle mistress. How about we make this interesting? One-hand winner takes all. I'll stake $500 against, let's say, that parcel of land by Willow Creek." Cole's hand hesitated over his cards. That land was all he had left, 40 acres of scrub and hope. But $500, that would buy seed cattle, maybe even hired hands to work through the drought. The whiskey whispered promises in his ear. "You're on." The cards fell like judgment. Cole's full house kings over 10 seemed unbeatable until Sullivan laid down 4 aces with the casual grace of a man who'd never lost a hand he didn't mean to. "Unfortunate," Sullivan murmured, though his smile suggested otherwise. "But the night's still young. One more hand, I'll give you a chance to win it all back." "I've got nothing left to stake." Cole admitted, the words tasting like ashes. Sullivan leaned back, his chair creaking. "Oh, I wouldn't say that. You're still a free man, aren't you? Your choices are your own." He paused, savoring the moment like aged bourbon. "I'll stake your land back plus $1,000 cash against a marriage contract." The saloon fell silent. Even the piano player stopped mid-note. "You're insane," Cole breathed. "Am I? It's simple. You lose, you marry whoever I choose within the week. You win. You walk out of here with enough money to save your ranch, and then some." Sullivan's eyes glittered. "Unless you're too yellow to bet on yourself." Blackwood cleared his throat. "Now, Vince, that's hardly legal." "Oh, it's perfectly legal. A man can enter into any contract he chooses. Isn't that right, counselor?" Sullivan nodded to a thin man in the corner Cole hadn't noticed before, Josiah Hartley, the town's lawyer, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but nodded reluctantly. "Technically, yes. If both parties consent and the terms are clear." Cole's mind raced. The odds of Sullivan dealing himself another winning hand seemed impossible. The man couldn't be that lucky twice. And $1,000, it would change everything. "Who?" Cole asked. "Who would I have to marry?" Sullivan's smile widened. "Why, the widow Johnson, of course." Amara Johnson. The name hit the saloon like a thunderclap. Amara Johnson, the black woman who'd inherited a small plot of land when her husband, a freed slave turned farmer, had died of fever 2 winters back. She kept to herself, mostly selling vegetables at the market, ignoring the whispers and stares of a town that tolerated her presence but never welcomed it. "You can't be serious," Cole said. "Deadly serious. Think of it as a civic duty. Poor woman's been alone too long. Needs a strong man to take care of her." The mockery in Sullivan's voice was thick as molasses. "Course, if you're too proud to risk it." Cole looked at his cards, then at the pile of money on the table. His mind felt foggy, the whiskey and desperation mixing into something dangerous. What were the odds he'd already seen Sullivan pull 4 aces? The man couldn't have another hand like that. "Deal," Cole said. The cards came fast. Cole watched his hand form 3 7s. Strong. Not unbeatable, but strong. He raised. Sullivan called. The river card gave Cole a full house 7s over 4s. "All in," Cole announced, pushing forward the deed to his land. Sullivan didn't even hesitate. "Call." Cole laid down his full house with shaking hands. Sullivan studied the cards for a long moment, then sighed dramatically. "Well, Walker, you almost had me." He laid down a straight flush, 5 through 9 of hearts, each card falling like a nail in Cole's coffin. "Congratulations on your upcoming nuptials." The saloon erupted in laughter. Men slapped tables, spilled drinks, howled at the cosmic joke of it all. Cole Walker, proud cowboy forced to marry Amara Johnson, the town's black widow. It was the kind of story that would be told in every saloon from here to San Antonio. Cole stood so fast his chair crashed backward. "You cheated." Sullivan's hand moved to his vest where the outline of a derringer was visible. "Careful with your accusations, Walker. You lost fair and square in front of witnesses. The contract's binding. Hartley here will draw up the papers tonight." "I won't do it." "Then you'll be in breach of contract. I'll take your land anyway, and Judge Morrison will back me up. You know he will." Sullivan's voice dropped to a whisper only Cole could hear. "Besides, think of the poor widow. All alone, struggling to keep her little farm going. She could use a strong back to help with the work. Consider it charity." Cole's fists clenched, but the 2 hired guns had their hands on their pistols. Fighting would only get him killed, leaving his debts unpaid and his name dishonored. At least this way. What? At least this way he'd still be breathing. He stumbled out of the saloon into the cold October night. Sullivan's laughter following him like a curse. The stars above seemed to mock him, distant and indifferent to his ruin. He'd lost everything, his land, his pride, and now his freedom. But worse than all of that was the knowledge that he'd be dragging an innocent woman into his misery. 3 days. Sullivan had given him 3 days to make arrangements. Cole spent the first day drinking himself into oblivion in his empty cabin, trying to forget the catastrophe he'd brought upon himself. The second day he rode out to what used to be his land, now marked with Sullivan's surveyor stakes, and seriously considered just keeping riding until Texas was a memory. But something, call it honor, call it stupidity, kept him from running. His father hadn't raised a coward, even if he'd raised a fool. The third day, he cleaned himself up as best he could, put on his least patched shirt, and rode to Amara Johnson's farm. The place was small but tidy, 5 acres of vegetables and corn growing despite the drought, fed by a clever system of irrigation ditches from the creek. The cabin was freshly whitewashed flower boxes under the windows, bursting with color. It spoke of someone who refused to let the world's hardness rob them of beauty. Cole found her in the garden, bent over tomato plants, her dark hands gentle as she tied them to stakes. She wore a simple brown dress, her hair wrapped in a blue cloth. When she heard his horse, she straightened, and Cole felt the full weight of her gaze, intelligent, wary, and utterly unafraid. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. "I heard you might be coming." "You heard?" "This is a small town. News travels fast, especially news as entertaining as this." She set down her basket, wiping her hands on her apron. "I assume Mr. Sullivan sent you." "Ma'am, Cole removed his hat, crushing the brim in his hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. I was drunk and stupid and prideful, and now you're caught up in my mess." She studied him for a long moment. "You could run." "I could." Thought about it, but that would make me a coward on top of everything else. And marrying a woman you don't know, a black woman at that, in a town that will mock you for it forever, that doesn't bother you. Cole met her eyes. What bothers me is forcing you into something you didn't choose. The rest, I reckon I earned whatever mockery comes my way. Amara walked closer, and Cole could see she was younger than he'd thought, maybe 30, with smooth, dark skin and eyes that seemed to hold depths he couldn't fathom. "Mr. Sullivan owns the note on my land," she said quietly. "He bought it from the bank last month. He made it clear that if I didn't agree to this marriage, he'd call in the loan immediately. I'd lose everything my husband and I built." The full scope of Sullivan's scheme hit Cole like a physical blow. This wasn't just about humiliating him, it was about forcing Amara off her land one way or another. Either she married Cole and became a laughingstock, potentially driving them both out of town, or she refused and lost her farm anyway. "That bastard," Cole breathed. "Yes," Amara agreed simply. "But bastard or not, he holds the cards. So, Mr. Walker, it seems we're both trapped. There has to be another way. If you found one, I'm listening." She waited, but Cole had nothing to offer. "I thought not. The wedding is tomorrow. Reverend Mills has agreed to perform the ceremony, though I suspect half the town will be there to watch the spectacle." "You're just accepting this." For the first time, Amara's composure cracked, and Cole saw a flash of fury so intense it made him step back. "Accepting, Mr. Walker. I buried my husband 2 years ago. I've worked this land alone, fighting drought and locusts and men who think a widow, especially a black widow, has no business owning property. I've been cheated at the market, threatened in town, had my fences cut and my crops trampled. And through it all, I've survived. Not because I accept things, but because I know when to fight and when to wait." She took a breath, steadying herself. This marriage is not an ending, it's just another challenge to overcome. Cole felt something shift in his chest, a mixture of shame and admiration. "You're stronger than I am." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I am. But strength alone won't get us through this. We need to be smart. Sullivan wants us to fail to run, to give him an excuse to take everything. We won't give him that satisfaction. You're talking like we're really going to do this. Get married. Live as—" Cole couldn't finish the sentence. "We'll do what we must to survive, Mr. Walker. That's all anyone can do." She turned back to her garden. "The ceremony is at noon. Please don't be drunk." Cole left her farm feeling worse than when he'd arrived. He'd expected tears, rage, maybe even violence. Instead, he'd found a woman who faced disaster with the kind of quiet dignity he could only dream of possessing. She deserved better than this farce. She deserved better than him. But deserving had nothing to do with the hand they'd been dealt. The next morning, Cole stood in the small church wearing his father's old suit that smelled of mothballs and memory. The pews were packed just as Amara had predicted. Sullivan sat in the front row like a king at Court Blackwood, beside him both men radiating satisfaction. The townspeople whispered and giggled, treating the whole affair like a carnival show. $5 says she doesn't show," someone muttered. "10 says Walker runs before she gets here," another replied. Reverend Mills stood at the altar, his discomfort obvious. He was a good man, Cole knew, but not strong enough to refuse Sullivan's request to perform the ceremony. Then the church doors opened and Amara walked in. She wore a blue dress, simple but elegant, with small white flowers woven into her hair. She walked down the aisle with her head high, meeting every stare with calm defiance. The whispers died as she passed, replaced by something like awe. Even in this forced humiliation, she carried herself like a queen. When she reached Cole, she took his offered arm without hesitation. "You came," he whispered. "I told you I would." Reverend Mills cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Cole Walker and Amara Johnson in holy matrimony." The words washed over Cole like a dream. This couldn't be real. He couldn't be standing here forcing this proud woman into a marriage. Neither of them wanted, all because he'd been too stupid and proud to walk away from a card game. "Do you, Cole Walker, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part?" Cole looked at Amara. Her face was serene, but he could see the tension in her jaw the way her fingers gripped her small bouquet. I do, he said, the words tasting like sand. And do you, Amara Johnson, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part? A pause. The church held its breath. Sullivan leaned forward, eager as a vulture. I do, Amara said, her voice clear and strong. Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Cole looked at Amara unsure. She gave the tiniest nod and he leaned in, pressing his lips briefly to hers. They were soft and warm, and for just a moment he forgot where they were, forgot the mockery and shame. For just a moment it felt real. Then Sullivan started clapping, slow and mocking, and the spell broke. Congratulations to the happy couple, Sullivan called out. May your union be everything you deserve. The laughter that followed them out of the church was worse than any beating Cole had ever taken. But Amara never let go of his arm, never lowered her head, never gave them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Outside, Cole's horse and wagon waited. He'd assumed she'd want to collect her things from her cabin. But Amara surprised him. My belongings are already at your place, she said. I moved them yesterday. You... what? We're married now, Mr. Walker. Legally bound. I won't give anyone reason to question the validity of this union. She climbed onto the wagon seat. Shall we go home? Home. Cole's cabin was 12 miles outside town, isolated and run down, barely fit for one person, let alone two. But Amara was right. It was home now for both of them. The ride was silent, except for the creak of wheels and the distant cry of hawks. Cole wanted to say something, anything, to break the tension, but words failed him. What could he possibly say? Sorry I ruined your life. Thanks for not making a scene. When they finally reached the cabin, Cole saw it through her eyes, the sagging porch, the patched roof, the yard overgrown with weeds. It was a far cry from her tidy little farm. I'll fix it up, he said quickly. The roof needs work and the porch, and Mr. Walker. Amara climbed down from the wagon. Cole. May I call you Cole? Of course. Cole then, and you'll call me Amara. We need to establish some things if this is going to work. She walked to the porch, testing the boards with her foot. First, I'm not your servant. I'll cook and keep house because it needs doing, but not because it's my duty as a wife. Second, you'll not touch me without permission. This may be a legal marriage, but it's not a real one, and I won't pretend otherwise in private. Third, you'll not drink to excess. I won't live with a drunk. Cole nodded. Fair enough. Anything else? Yes, we present a united front to the world. Whatever our private arrangements publicly, we're husband and wife. Sullivan wants us to fail to give him an excuse to take everything. We won't give him that satisfaction. Agreed. Amara surveyed the cabin once more. This will do. It's not fancy, but it's solid. We can make it work. Why? Cole asked suddenly. Why are you being so practical about this? Most women would be crying or raging or... I'm not most women, Amara interrupted. I've survived worse than this, Cole Walker. My grandmother was born into slavery. My mother died when I was 12. I've been bought, sold, freed, married, widowed, and now bartered like cattle in a poker game. Each time I could have laid down and died. Each time I chose to survive instead. This is just one more trial. She entered the cabin, leaving Cole standing in the yard, humbled by her strength. He'd thought he was the victim in all this, but Amara had lost just as much, maybe more. At least he'd chosen to sit at that poker table. She'd had no choice at all. Inside the cabin was as sparse as he'd left it, one room with a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, a wood stove, and not much else. Amara had placed her trunk near the door, but hadn't unpacked. I'll sleep in the barn, Cole offered. No, that would raise questions if anyone came by. You'll sleep on the floor. I've brought blankets. That night, Cole lay on the hard floor, listening to Amara's quiet breathing from the bed. The moonlight through the window caught the edge of her face, peaceful in sleep. She was beautiful, he realized. Not just in her features, but in her bearing, her strength, her refusal to be broken by circumstances that would have destroyed most people. He thought about Sullivan's smirking face, Blackwood's cruel laughter, the whole town treating their marriage like a joke. Anger burned in his chest, but underneath it was something else: determination. Amara was right. They couldn't let Sullivan win. Somehow they had to turn this disaster into something else, something neither Sullivan nor the town expected. But first they had to survive. The next morning, Cole woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Amara was already up dressed and cooking breakfast on the stove. She'd cleaned too. The layer of dust that had covered everything was gone, and she'd even placed a jar of wildflowers on the table. "Morning," she said without turning. "There's work to be done if we're going to make this place livable. I can do it myself." "No." She turned to face him. "We do it together. That's how this works. Together or not at all." After breakfast, they worked side by side, patching the roof, reinforcing the porch, clearing the weeds. Amara was stronger than she looked, hefting boards and swinging a hammer with practiced ease. They didn't talk much, but the silence was companionable rather than awkward. Around midday, a rider approached Tom Bennett, who owned the neighboring ranch. Cole tensed, expecting mockery, or worse, but Tom just tipped his hat. "Mrs. Walker, sir," he said to Amara, and Cole saw her flinch slightly at the name. "Cole, heard you got married. Congratulations." "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," Amara replied with dignity. Tom shifted in his saddle. "My wife Sarah wanted me to invite you both for Sunday dinner, if you're interested." Cole started to decline, but Amara spoke first. "We'd be delighted. Thank you." After Tom left, Cole turned to her. "Why'd you accept it'll just be another chance for folks to gawk and gossip?" "Maybe. Or maybe the Bennetts are decent people who want to be neighborly. We won't know unless we try." She resumed hammering. "Besides, hiding away is what Sullivan expects. I won't give him the satisfaction." That evening, as they ate a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, Cole found himself studying his new wife. She moved with economical grace, wasting nothing, every action purposeful. When she caught him looking, she raised an eyebrow. "Something on your mind? Just, you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Tears hysteria, a weak woman who needed saving. "I don't know. Maybe." Amara set down her fork. "Let me tell you something about expectations, Cole. My whole life people have expected things of me. Expected me to be grateful for freedom, as if it was a gift rather than a right. Expected me to be satisfied with scraps, to lower my eyes, to know my place. I've learned that the best way to survive is to be exactly what they don't expect." And what's that? Unbreakable. The word hung between them like a challenge and a promise. 3 days into their marriage, they made their first trip to town for supplies. Cole dreaded it, knowing the reception they'd receive, but Amara insisted. "We need flour and coffee and other essentials. Besides, the longer we wait, the worse it will be." She was right, of course. The moment they entered Morrison's general store, conversation stopped. Every eye turned to them, some curious, some hostile, most amused. "Well, well," Mrs. Morrison said from behind the counter, her tone dripping false sweetness. "The newlyweds. How unexpected." "Good morning, Mrs. Morrison," Amara replied pleasantly. "We need supplies." As Amara moved through the store, selecting items with care, Cole heard the whispers start. "Can you believe it? Cole Walker married to a... Sullivan says he lost her in a poker game. What kind of man does that? What kind of woman agrees to it?" Cole's fists clenched, but Amara touched his arm lightly, a warning to stay calm. At the counter, Mrs. Morrison tallied their purchases slowly, as if hoping to prolong their discomfort. "That'll be $12.40. "That seems high," Amara observed mildly. "Prices have gone up." "Have they? How interesting that they've gone up just for us." Amara's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'll pay your inflated price this once, Mrs. Morrison, but if it happens again, we'll take our business to Millerville. I'm sure they'll appreciate our money more than you do." Mrs. Morrison's face flushed, but she adjusted the total down to $8, still high, but not insultingly so. As they loaded the wagon, Samuel Blackwood emerged from the bank across the street. His suit was immaculate, despite the dust his mustache waxed to points. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker," he called out, his voice carrying deliberately. "How wonderful to see you embracing married life." "Mr. Blackwood," Cole growled. I do hope you're settling in well, though I imagine it must be quite an adjustment for both of you. Such different backgrounds. Amara stepped forward before Cole could respond. You're right, Mr. Blackwood. Cole's not used to having someone who can read and write and do arithmetic without using their fingers, but I'm sure he'll adjust. Several people within earshot chuckled, and Blackwood's smile faltered. How amusing, though I wonder if you'll still be laughing when Sullivan comes to collect on that note he holds on your land. My husband's land now, Amara corrected, and we'll meet any legal obligations when they come due. Good day, Mr. Blackwood. She climbed onto the wagon seat with perfect poise, leaving Blackwood standing in the street. As they drove away, Cole couldn't help but grin. That was something. He wanted to humiliate us. I won't allow it. She adjusted her bonnet against the sun. But we need to be careful. Sullivan and Blackwood aren't just cruel, they're planning something. What do you mean? Think about it. Why force this marriage just to humiliate you? Sullivan could have done that a dozen different ways. No, he wants something more. Cole considered this as they rode. Your land. He wants your land. Yes, but why? It's only 5 acres, not particularly valuable. Unless, Cole pulled the horses to a stop. Unless he knows something we don't. About the railroad, maybe, or water rights, Amara finished. My land has the best access to Willow Creek, in a drought that's worth more than gold. The full scope of Sullivan's plan became clear. Force an impossible marriage, wait for it to fall apart, then seize both their lands when they defaulted on debts or fled town in shame. Either way, Sullivan won. We can't let him have it, Cole said. No, Amara agreed. We can't. They drove the rest of the way in thoughtful silence, each considering the battle ahead. As the cabin came into view, Cole noticed smoke rising from behind the barn. What the hell? He urged the horses faster, and they rounded the barn to find a small fire burning in the yard, feeding on what looked like furniture, broken chairs, old crates, anything wooden and useless. What are you doing? Cole demanded, jumping from the wagon. But Amara was smiling. Making space. If we're going to fight Sullivan, we need this place to be more than just a cabin. We need it to be a home, a fortress, somewhere worth defending. She pulled a paper from her pocket, a deed. I sold my wagon and plow in town while you were getting the horses. We have enough money now to buy lumber, maybe even glass for proper windows. You sold your Amara, those were yours from your husband. My husband is dead, she said firmly. I'm alive, and I intend to stay that way. The past can't help us now. Only the future matters. That night as they ate dinner, Cole found himself telling her about his father, about the ranch he'd lost, about the pride that had been his downfall. Amara listened without judgment, occasionally asking a question, but mostly just letting him talk. When he finished, she told him about her grandmother born into slavery in Georgia, freed after the war, only to face different but no less cruel challenges. About her mother, who'd died young, but had taught Amara to read and write, to never accept less than she deserved. She used to say, "Baby girl, they can take everything from you, but your dignity. Don't you ever give that away." She sounds like a wise woman. She was. She would have liked you, I think. Even though Cole gestured vaguely at himself. Even though you're what white, poor, prideful, foolish enough to gamble away your freedom. Amara smiled slightly. She always said it's not what a man is that matters, but what he does when tested. You're being tested now, Cole Walker. We both are. As the days passed, they fell into a routine. Morning chores, working on improvements to the cabin, trips to town when necessary. The townspeople still whispered and stared, but gradually a few began to nod in greeting. The Bennett's Sunday dinner had gone better than expected. Sarah Bennett had been warm and welcoming, and their children had been fascinated by Amara's stories. But not everyone was warming to them. One morning, Cole found their fence cut and several chickens missing. Another day, someone had trampled through Amara's carefully tended garden. The message was clear: they weren't welcome. We should report it to the sheriff, Cole said, surveying the damage. Sheriff Watson. Amara laughed bitterly. He's in Sullivan's pocket. No, we handle this ourselves. That night, Cole sat on the porch with his rifle, keeping watch. Around midnight, he heard horses approaching. 3 riders moving slow and quiet. He recognized one silhouette, Jake Thornton, one of Sullivan's hired guns. Cole fired a warning shot into the air. "That's far enough." The riders stopped. "Just checking on the newlyweds," Thornton called out. "Making sure you're comfortable." "We're fine. Now get off our land." "Your land, I heard Sullivan holds the note on this place too." "Not yet, he doesn't," Cole replied. "And if I see you here again, I'll assume you're rustlers and act accordingly." The riders laughed but turned away. After they left, Amara emerged from the cabin, her own rifle in hand. "You were ready," Cole observed. "I'm always ready. Had to be living alone as long as I did." She sat beside him on the porch. "They'll be back." "I know." "We need help. We can't fight them alone." Cole considered this. "Tom Bennett might stand with us. Maybe a few others if we approach them right. The minister's wife, Mrs. Mills, has been kind when I've seen her in town. And there's Miguel Santana. He knows what it's like to be an outsider." They were building a list of potential allies when they heard a low rumble in the distance like thunder, but wrong, somehow. Cole stood peering into the darkness. "What is that?" The rumble grew louder, and with it came a flickering orange glow on the horizon. "Fire," Amara breathed. "Something's burning." They hitched the horses quickly and rode toward the glow. As they crested the hill, they saw the Bennett ranch was ablaze, the barn fully engulfed flames licking at the house. Tom Bennett and his hired hands were forming a bucket brigade, but it was clearly hopeless. Without hesitation, Cole and Amara joined the line passing buckets until their arms ached. Other neighbors arrived, even some who'd shunned them in town. For hours they fought the fire together, finally saving the house, though the barn was lost. As dawn broke, Tom Bennett approached them, his face streaked with soot and exhaustion. "Thank you," he said simply. "Both of you." "Anyone would have done the same," Cole replied. "No," Tom said firmly. "They wouldn't have. You two came first, worked hardest, after how folks have treated you." He shook his head. "I won't forget this." As they rode home, Amara was quiet. Finally, she spoke. "The fire wasn't an accident." "No, Sullivan's sending a message. Or testing us, seeing who stands with whom." She looked at Cole. "We passed the test. The question is what comes next." What came next arrived 2 days later in the form of Josiah Hartley, the lawyer looking uncomfortable as he stood on their porch. "Mr. Walker, Mrs. Walker, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news." Cole's stomach dropped. "Sullivan's calling in the note." "Not exactly. He's modifying the terms. You have 30 days to pay in full $1,000 or forfeit the land." "That's impossible," Cole exploded. "We don't have that kind of money." "I'm aware. I tried to argue against it, but the original contract allows for acceleration of payment under certain conditions." Hartley looked genuinely distressed. "I'm sorry. I never should have drawn up those papers." After he left, Cole slumped in a chair. "We're finished." But Amara was reading the contract, her finger tracking each line. "Maybe not. Look here, the acceleration clause only applies if we're in breach of the marriage contract. We're not in breach. We got married." "Yes, but Sullivan could argue it's not a real marriage. We'd need to prove otherwise." Cole looked at her, understanding dawning. "You mean—" "I mean we need to be husband and wife in every way that matters, at least publicly, and we need to find a way to raise $1,000 in 30 days. It seemed impossible. But as Cole looked at his wife, and she was his wife now, in more than just name, he saw that determined set to her jaw, that fire in her eyes, that said she'd rather die than surrender. "All right," he said. "Where do we start?" Amara spread the papers across the kitchen table, her fingers tracing columns of numbers she'd been calculating since dawn. "We have $30 saved the money from selling my wagon and plow. If we sell the extra horses, maybe another 40. That's $70, Cole. We need 930 more." Cole paced the small cabin, his boots wearing a path in the floorboards. "The cattle market's in 3 weeks. If we could get our hands on some steers—" "With what money and whose cattle?" Amara interrupted. "We can't think like that. We need something legal, something Sullivan can't challenge." A knock at the door made them both freeze. Cole grabbed his rifle, moving cautiously. Through the window, he saw Tom Bennett standing on the porch, hat in hand. "Tom," Cole said, opening the door. Everything all right? Mind if I come in? Tom glanced nervously over his shoulder. Rather not have this conversation where anyone might see. Once inside, Tom accepted Amara's offer of coffee, wrapping his weathered hands around the cup. Word's gotten around about Sullivan calling in your note. Whole town's talking about it. Come to watch the show, Cole asked bitterly. Come to help if you'll let me. Tom reached into his jacket, pulling out a leather pouch. There's $200 here. It's not charity, it's payment for a debt. You saved my home, probably my family's lives. This doesn't close to cover that, but it's what I can spare. Amara's eyes widened. Tom, we can't. You can and you will, Tom's voice was firm. My Sarah would skin me alive if I didn't help after what you did. Besides, Sullivan's gotten too big for his britches. Someone needs to stand up to him. You do this, he'll come after you next, Cole warned. Maybe, but I've got friends' influence he doesn't know about. My brother-in-law's a judge in Austin. Sullivan might own Sheriff Watson, but he doesn't own Texas. Tom stood to leave, then paused. There's something else. Sarah heard from her cousin that the railroad's surveying land north of here. Might be worth checking if your wife's old property is along the proposed route. After Tom left, Cole counted the money 3 times, as if it might multiply through hope alone. $270. Still not enough, but it's a start. It's more than that, Amara said thoughtfully. It's proof we're not alone. If Tom Bennett stands with us, others might too. The next morning brought another surprise. Sarah Bennett arrived with several other women, the minister's wife, the schoolteacher Miss Catherine, and surprisingly Maria Santana Miguel's wife. We've come to help, Sarah announced, marching into the cabin like a general taking territory. This whole situation is disgraceful and we won't stand for it. But what can you do? Amara asked, genuinely puzzled. What can't we do? Maria laughed. My husband says you make the best preserves he's ever tasted, Amara. Sarah has connections with merchants in Austin. Catherine knows everyone in 3 counties. We're going to help you sell everything you can produce. Within hours, the women had transformed the cabin into a production center. Amara's carefully preserved vegetables, jams, and pickles were labeled and packed. Catherine had already written letters to boarding houses in nearby towns offering bulk supplies at competitive prices. The church social is next week, Mrs. Mills added. We'll set up a booth, sell everything we can. People might whisper about your marriage, but they won't turn down quality goods at fair prices. Cole watched in amazement as Amara worked alongside the women, her usual reserved demeanor warming into something approaching joy. When she laughed at something Maria said, the sound struck him like lightning. He'd never heard her truly laugh before. That evening, after the women left, Amara stood surveying the boxes of goods ready for sale. Do you think it'll work? I think you've got something those women recognize, Cole said. Strength, grace under pressure, the kind of thing that makes people want to fight alongside you. She looked at him curiously. Is that what you see? Among other things. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Amara turned away, busying herself with inventory lists. We should get some rest. Tomorrow we start visiting the neighboring farms, see if anyone needs help with harvest. Every dollar counts. But rest wouldn't come easy. Near midnight, the thunder of hooves shattered the quiet. Cole was out the door with his rifle before the riders reached the yard. This time it wasn't just hired guns. Sullivan himself sat astride a black stallion, his pale face ghostly in the moonlight. Walker, Sullivan called out, his voice carrying that snake oil smoothness. Thought we should talk man to man. Nothing to talk about. You made your terms clear. Terms can be modified for the right price. Sullivan dismounted, his expensive boots crunching on the dry ground. I'm prepared to forget the whole debt, tear up the contract, give you back your land free and clear. Cole lowered his rifle slightly. In exchange for what? The marriage annulment. Your wife agrees to sell me her original property, and you both leave Texas. Tonight. Go to hell. Sullivan's laugh was cold as winter wind. I expected as much, but I thought your wife might be more, practical. He raised his voice. Mrs. Walker, I know you're listening. $5,000 cash. Enough to start over anywhere. All you have to do is leave. Amara appeared in the doorway, still in her nightdress, but wrapped in a shawl, the shotgun in her hand, steady as stone. Mr. Sullivan, My grandmother had a saying, the devil always pays in coin that turns to dust. I'll take my chances with honest poverty over your blood money. Blood money? Sullivan's false shock was theatrical. I'm trying to help you both avoid an unfortunate situation. The only unfortunate situation here is you thinking we'll run, Amara said. This is our home, our land, and if you want it, you'll have to take it legally. Though given how you conduct business, I doubt you know what that word means. Sullivan's mask slipped, revealing the cruel calculation beneath. You think you're clever, don't you? The high and mighty widow too good for the likes of us. Well, let me tell you something. This town doesn't want you here. They tolerate you because they have to, but push comes to shove, they'll stand aside and watch you burn. Like they watched Tom Bennett's barn burn, Cole interjected. Funny how that happened right after he showed us kindness. Accidents happen especially to those who don't know their place. Sullivan remounted his horse. 30 days, Walker. After that, everything you think you own becomes mine, including your wife. What's that supposed to mean? Cole stepped forward, rifle raising. Check the fine print of your marriage contract. Default on the debt and guardianship of assets and dependence transfers to the creditor. Old Texas law, but still valid. His smile was vicious. Your wife would become my ward subject to my decisions about her welfare and living arrangements. Cole would have shot him. Then consequences be damned, but Amara's hand on his arm stopped him. Get off our land, she said quietly. Now. Sullivan tipped his hat mockingly and rode away, his men following like shadows. Cole stood shaking with rage until the hoofbeats faded into distance. He can't do that. The law doesn't work that way. It might, Amara said grimly. Old slave codes modified after the war but never fully repealed. A black woman without means or male protection? She trailed off. We need to see a real lawyer, not Hartley. With what money? We'll find a way. We always do. The next few days blurred together in desperate activity. Cole hired himself out for day labor at surrounding ranches, earning a few dollars breaking horses and mending fences. Amara worked 18-hour days producing goods for sale, while also helping neighbors with their harvests in exchange for a share of crops she could preserve and sell. The church social arrived on a sweltering Saturday. Half the town showed up, curiosity overwhelming propriety. Amara's booth, decorated with cheerful fabrics Sarah Bennett had donated, drew steady customers. The preserves sold quickly, but it was Amara herself who proved the real draw. She charmed customers with stories about her grandmother's recipes, offered tastes of her specialties, and handled even the rudest comments with grace that shamed the speakers into buying something. Cole worked the crowd differently, talking to men about horses and cattle, carefully planting seeds of doubt about Sullivan's business practices. He found more sympathy than expected. Several ranchers had suffered from Sullivan's predatory lending, though none had been brave enough to speak publicly. Sullivan holds paper on half the county. Marcus Webb confided, whiskey loosening his tongue. Man's got a gift for being there with a loan just when folks are desperate, then calling it in when they can't pay. Someone should do something, Cole suggested carefully. Someone should, Marcus agreed. But who's got the stones to bell that particular cat? By day's end, they'd raised another $150. Added to what they had, it brought them to $420, not even halfway to their goal, with only 2 weeks remaining. That night, as they counted the money by lamplight, Amara suddenly laughed, not with joy, but with a kind of desperate humor. What's funny? Us. This whole situation. A month ago, I was a widow tending my vegetables. You were a broken rancher drowning in whiskey. Now we're married, fighting for our lives against a man who owns half the county, and somehow we've got the minister's wife selling preserves for us. Cole found himself smiling despite everything. When you put it that way, it does sound insane. My first husband used to say that life was like a river. Sometimes you swim, sometimes you float, but if you stop moving, you drown. She looked at the money spread between them. We're swimming hard, but the current's against us. You miss him, Cole observed, not a question. Every day. James was a good man, gentle, patient, nothing like... She stopped abruptly. Nothing like me. I didn't mean... It's all right. I know what I am, Amara. A drunk, a gambler, a fool who wagered his freedom on a hand of cards. You deserved better than being bartered like cattle. Amara was quiet for a long moment. You know what I've learned, Cole deserving has nothing to do with what we get. James deserved to live past 35. I deserved to have children with him. You deserved a father who didn't drink himself to death and leave you with nothing but debt and shame. Cole flinched. He'd told her about his father one night, the words spilling out like blood from a wound. But here's the thing, Amara continued. We can sit around lamenting what we deserved, or we can fight for what we can still have. And right now, what we can still have is this land, this home, this chance to spit in Sullivan's eye. You really hate him, don't you? Hate's too small a word. He represents everything that's tried to grind me down my whole life. The assumption that I'm less than that, I should be grateful for scraps, that my life is worth less than his comfort. Her eyes blazed. So yes, I'll fight him with everything I have, even if it means being married to a white man who lost me in a poker game. The words stung, but Cole recognized the truth in them. I'm sorry, for all of it. I don't want your apologies. I want your commitment. Are you in this fight or not? I'm in it. Then stop feeling sorry for yourself and start thinking. We need $600 more in 2 weeks. How do we get it? Before Cole could answer, a sound outside made them both freeze. Footsteps on the porch, too heavy to be any of their few friends. Cole reached for his rifle, but the door burst open before he could grab it. 3 men entered, all armed. Cole recognized 2 as Sullivan's hired guns, but the third was a stranger, tall, scarred, with eyes cold as a snake's. Evening, folks, the scarred man said pleasantly. Name's Morrison. Mr. Sullivan thought you might need some encouragement to reconsider his offer. Get out of our house, Amara said, her voice steady despite the gun pointed at her. Your house, not for much longer. Morrison picked up the cash box from the table, weighing it in his hand. This your payment fund. Shame if something happened to it. Touch that money and I'll kill you, Cole growled. Morrison laughed. With what? You're unarmed and we've got guns on both of you, but we're not here to rob you. We're here to make you understand something. He moved closer to Amara, who stood her ground despite the threat. This can go easy or hard. Easy is you take Sullivan's offer and leave tonight. Hard is unpleasant for everyone, especially your wife. Cole saw red. He lunged at Morrison, catching him off guard and driving him into the wall. They grappled for the gun, Cole's rage giving him strength, but the other men moved in one, clubbing Cole with a pistol butt, sending him to his knees. Stop, Amara shouted. Stop it now. Morrison straightened his shirt, spitting blood from where Cole had connected with his jaw. Feisty couple. Sullivan said you might be difficult. He nodded to his men. Burn it. What? Cole struggled to his feet, head spinning. The preserves, the goods for sale, burn it all. Morrison smiled coldly. Let's see how you make your payment without inventory. No. Amara moved to block them, but Morrison caught her arm, his grip cruel enough to leave bruises. Don't make this worse, woman. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin. Morrison stood stunned, his cheek reddening where Amara had struck him. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then unexpectedly, Morrison laughed. You've got spirit. Sullivan's going to enjoy breaking you. He released her arm. Boys, forget the burning. We've made our point. They left as suddenly as they'd come, taking nothing but leaving the threat hanging like a noose. Cole immediately went to Amara, checking her arm where Morrison had grabbed her. I'm fine, she said, though he could see the marks forming. We need to leave, tonight. Take what money we have and run. No. Amara, they'll be back. Next time we'll be ready. She moved to the window, watching the riders disappear into darkness. They want us to run. That's why they didn't actually burn anything. They want us scared, not desperate. Scared people run. Desperate people fight. This isn't a fight we can win. Not alone. Amara turned to him, a strange light in her eyes. But we're not alone anymore. Tomorrow, we go to town. We tell everyone what happened here tonight. We show them these bruises. We make Sullivan's threats public. That'll just make him madder. Good. Angry men make mistakes. And Sullivan's already made one. What mistake? He sent Morrison. I know that name. My husband mentioned him once. Morrison was involved in some land scheme in Houston that went bad. People died. If we can find proof of what he did, connect him to Sullivan, That's a big if. It's better than giving up. She touched his face gently, surprising him. You fought for me tonight. No one's ever done that before. You're my wife, Cole said simply. In name only, we agreed. Maybe that was another mistake. The words hung between them heavy with possibility. Amara's hand was still on his cheek, warm and soft. For a moment Cole thought she might kiss him. Then she stepped back, the moment breaking like glass. We should rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But Cole couldn't sleep. He sat by the window with his rifle, watching the darkness, thinking about the woman sleeping just feet away. She was magnificent in her courage, brilliant in her defiance. How had he ever thought this marriage was just his burden to bear? She was carrying just as much weight, fighting just as hard, maybe harder. When dawn came, it brought unexpected visitors. A dozen riders approached the cabin, and Cole's heart sank until he recognized Tom Bennett in the lead, accompanied by Marcus Webb Miguel Santana, and others, all men who'd suffered under Sullivan's boot. Morning, Cole, Tom called out. Heard you had some trouble last night. How did you... Sarah was worried, sent me to check on you early. Met these fellows on the way. Seems word's gotten around about Sullivan's latest move. Marcus Webb spat tobacco juice. Sending Morrison after a woman, that's low even for Sullivan. We've decided something, Miguel said, his usual quiet voice firm with resolve. Sullivan's had his boot on this county's neck for too long. We're standing with you. I appreciate that, but no buts, Tom interrupted. We've all got stories about Sullivan. Loans called in early, property seized on technicalities, good people driven off their land. But we were all too scared or too alone to fight. You two have shown us we don't have to be either. Amara appeared in the doorway, dressed and ready for the day. Gentlemen, would you like some coffee? We need to discuss strategy. They gathered in the yard, not everyone fitting in the small cabin. As Amara served coffee, the men shared their grievances against Sullivan. The list was long, and damning fraudulent contracts, forged signatures, intimidation, and worse. Judge Morrison, no relation to the gunman, is coming through on circuit next week, Tom said. If we present a united front testimony from multiple witnesses, Sullivan owned Sheriff Watson, Cole pointed out. He'll never serve papers. Then we bypass Watson, Marcus suggested. I've got a cousin who's a ranger. Rangers don't care much for local politics. This is dangerous, Amara warned. Sullivan won't go down without a fight. He'll come after all of you. Let him try, Miguel said quietly. My family has been in Texas since before it was Texas. We've fought Apache, Comanche, Mexican armies, and Confederate raiders. One crooked banker doesn't scare us. The meeting lasted hours, plans forming and solidifying. They would gather evidence, document everything, build a case that even a bought judge couldn't ignore. But first they needed to keep Cole and Amara's land out of Sullivan's hands. How much do you still need? Tom asked. $600, Cole admitted. The men exchanged glances. We can raise that, Marcus said. Between all of us, we can raise it. We can't take your money, Amara started. Not taking, investing, Tom grinned. Cole, you know horses better than anyone in the county. With proper backing, you could run a breeding operation that would benefit everyone. Consider this a business loan. At fair interest, Marcus added. We're not Sullivan. We don't want to own you. We want to partner with you. Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion. After years of isolation, of shame, of failure, these men were offering not just money, but respect, partnership, belonging. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Miguel suggested. And then let's go to town and make Sullivan sweat. The ride to town felt like a war party, though they carried no weapons beyond the usual. 12 men and 1 woman riding with purpose down Main Street. People stopped to stare. Conversations died. The whole town seemed to hold its breath. They dismounted at the bank. Blackwood emerged, his face paling at the sight of them. Gentlemen, Mrs. Walker, how can I help you? We're here to pay off the Walker debt, Tom announced loudly enough for the gathering crowd to hear. In full. That's not due for another week. We're paying it now, Marcus said. Unless there's a problem. Blackwood retreated into the bank. Minutes later, Sullivan himself appeared, his composure cracked but holding. This is unexpected, he said smoothly. I'll need to verify the funds, of course. Of course, Amar replied sweetly. We wouldn't want any irregularities like forged signatures or altered contracts. I'm sure you understand the importance of proper documentation. Sullivan's eye twitched. What are you implying? Nothing at all. Simply that in gathering our payment, we've discovered some interesting discrepancies in various contracts around town. I'm sure they're just clerical errors. The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. Sullivan looked around, calculating odds, measuring threats. The bank is closed, he announced suddenly. Come back tomorrow. The sign says you're open until 3, Cole observed. It's only noon. I said we're closed. Then we'll wait, Tom said pleasantly. Right here. All day if necessary. I'm sure folks would love to hear some stories while we wait, like that time you foreclosed on the widow Henderson, even though she had a receipt showing payment. Remember that Samuel? Blackwood shifted nervously. That was a misunderstanding. Lot of misunderstandings in this town, Marcus added. Maybe it's time to clear them all up. Sullivan's face flushed red. Fine. Bring the money inside. We'll settle this now. The transaction was tense, Sullivan and Blackwood examining every bill as if hoping to find forgeries. But the money was good, the amount exact. With obvious reluctance, Sullivan signed the receipt and handed over the deed. Congratulations, Bum, he said, his voice dripping venom. You've won this round. This isn't a game, Amar replied. It never was. Outside, the crowd erupted in cheers. People who'd avoided them for weeks suddenly wanted to shake hands, offer congratulations. The tide was turning, but Cole noticed Sullivan watching from the bank window, his expression calculating. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, by Mom. That evening, as they celebrated at the cabin with their newfound allies, Amara pulled Cole aside. He'll retaliate, she said quietly. I know. Are you ready for that? Cole looked at the men in their yard, laughing and sharing stories. He looked at Amara, strong and beautiful in the firelight. For the first time in years, he felt like he had something worth fighting for. I'm ready. She smiled, then a real smile that transformed her face. Good, because I think things are about to get very interesting. As if in response to her words, a rider appeared on the horizon, spurring hard toward them. It was Catherine, the schoolteacher, and her face was white with fear. They've taken Sarah Bennett, she gasped. Sullivan's men. They've taken her, and they're demanding Tom withdraw his support or else. The celebration died instantly. Tom's face went hard as granite. Where? The old mine shaft north of town. Morrison has her. Cole felt the group's rage building like a thunderstorm. This was Sullivan's response, not to strike at them directly, but at their families, their wives. We're going after her, Tom said flatly. That's what he wants, Amara warned. To draw us out, make us do something rash. I don't care what he wants. That's my wife. Then we do this smart, Cole said, surprising himself with his calm. Sullivan expects us to ride in guns blazing. Instead, we use the law. Marcus, can your ranger cousin be here by morning? If I ride hard, yes. Do it. The rest of us will keep watch on the mine, make sure they don't move her. But we don't engage unless forced. We're not giving Sullivan the excuse he wants to gun us all down. It was the longest night of Cole's life. They positioned themselves around the mine, watching, waiting. Tom was nearly mad with worry, but he held his position. Just before dawn, Marcus returned with not one, but 3 rangers. Kidnapping's a hanging offense, the lead ranger, Captain Hayes, said grimly. Where are they? The confrontation at the mine was brief. Faced with Texas Rangers, Morrison and his men surrendered without a fight. Sarah was shaken but unharmed, and her testimony was damning. Sullivan ordered it, she said, wrapped in Tom's arms. Morrison said Sullivan wanted to teach us all a lesson about crossing him. Captain Hayes looked grim. We'll be having a word with Mr. Sullivan. The arrest that followed shook the county. Sullivan, faced with multiple charges and a growing mountain of evidence, tried to flee, but was caught at the county line. Blackwood, seeking leniency, turned state's evidence revealing years of fraudulent dealings. The trial would take months, but the immediate threat was over. Cole and Amara stood outside the courthouse, watching as Sullivan was led away in chains. We did it, Cole said, hardly believing it. We survived it, Amara corrected. There's a difference. The morning after Sullivan's arrest, Cole woke to find Amara standing at the window, her silhouette framed by the early light. She hadn't slept, he could tell by the tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped her coffee cup like it might disappear. "Can't believe it's over," he said, joining her at the window. "It's not over." Her voice was quiet but certain. "Men like Sullivan don't just disappear. He has friends connections. This was just the first battle." As if summoned by her words, dust appeared on the horizon. Not one rider, but several moving fast toward their cabin. Cole reached for his rifle, but Amara stopped him with a touch. "Wait, look closer." The riders wore badges that caught the morning sun. Rangers, but not Captain Hayes and his men. These were different, their faces grim with purpose. The lead rider, a weathered man with silver threading through his black beard, dismounted at their gate. "Mr. Walker." "Mrs. Walker, I'm Marshal Theodore Cross from Austin. I need to speak with you about Vince Sullivan." "He's in jail," Cole said carefully. "Captain Hayes arrested him yesterday." "No, sir, he's not." Marshal Cross's expression was grave. "Sullivan escaped during transfer to Austin last night. 2 deputies are dead, and Sullivan's disappeared along with Morrison and several others." Amara's cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "How?" Cole managed. "Inside help. Someone in the Rangers' own ranks, we suspect. Sullivan's reach goes deeper than anyone realized." Cross pulled a telegram from his pocket. "This came for you an hour ago. We intercepted it at the telegraph office." Cole read the brief message aloud. "The game isn't over. Double or nothing. VS." "He's coming back," Amara said, her voice steady despite the fear Cole could see in her eyes. "He's coming back for us." Marshal Cross nodded grimly. "Which is why I'm here. The state of Texas has interest in Sullivan beyond your local troubles. He's connected to a larger network of corruption that reaches into the state capitol. You two are our best witnesses, which makes you targets." "So what do we do?" Cole asked. "Run, hide." "We protect you while building a federal case, but that means you need to stay visible, maintain normal life. If you run, Sullivan wins by default, your testimony becomes worthless if you're in hiding." "You're asking us to be bait," Amara observed. "I'm asking you to be brave," Cross corrected, "which from what I've heard, you already are." Tom Bennett arrived within the hour, Sarah beside him, both armed. Word spread quickly through their small alliance. By noon, their cabin had become a fortress of sorts, with men taking shifts on watch. But Amara grew restless with the waiting. "We can't just sit here," she told Cole that evening as they prepared a simple dinner. "Sullivan's out there planning something and we're acting like scared rabbits. What else can we do? We don't even know where he is." "No, but we know what he wants. The land. There's something about this land, Cole. Something more than just water rights." She was right, Cole realized. Sullivan's obsession had always seemed excessive for such modest acreage. That night, while others kept watch, Cole and Amara spread out every document they had. Deed surveys, old maps Tom had brought from the county records. "Here," Amara pointed to a surveyor's note from 10 years back. "Mineral deposits noted but not specified. What if Sullivan knows something about what's under our land?" "Oil," Cole suggested. "There have been strikes north of here. Or silver. The old Spanish mines were never fully mapped." She traced the creek line with her finger. If Sullivan had geological surveys done privately, their speculation was interrupted by gunfire. Cole grabbed his rifle and rushed outside to find their sentries firing at shadows in the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit up the night from multiple directions. "They're trying to surround us, Marcus shouted. Cole took position at the window, picking his targets carefully. Beside him, Amara loaded rifles with practiced efficiency, passing them to him as he fired. The attack was coordinated, professional, not the wild assault of hired guns, but something more dangerous. "The barn!" someone yelled, and Cole saw flames beginning to lick at the structure. A diversion, he realized. While they fought the fire, the attackers would breach the house. "Let it burn," he ordered. "Stay at your positions." But Miguel had already broken cover, running with buckets toward the burning barn where their horses were trapped. A shot rang out, and he fell clutching his shoulder. Without thinking, Cole rushed into the open, grabbing Miguel and dragging him to cover as bullets whined past. "Stupid gringo," Miguel gasped, blood seeping between his fingers. "Should have let me burn." Not a chance, friend. The firefight continued for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The attackers melted away into the darkness, leaving only the burning barn and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Marshal Cross appeared from wherever he'd been positioned, his rifle still smoking. Everyone alive. They did a quick count. Miguel was the worst injured, but Maria was already tending to him with the skill of someone who'd dealt with bullet wounds before. Others had minor wounds, cuts from flying splinters, burns from fighting the fire. This was a test, Cross announced. Sullivan wanted to see our defenses, our response. Next time will be worse. There won't be a next time, Amara said firmly. Everyone turned to look at her. We're done playing defense. Tomorrow we take the fight to him. How? Tom asked. We don't even know where he is. No, but I know where he'll be. She held up a paper, a notice from the county about a judicial review of land claims scheduled for next week. If Sullivan wants our land legally, he needs to be at this hearing. He'll try to claim we're dead or missing take possession through abandonment laws. It's a trap, Cole said immediately. He knows we'll have to appear to defend our claim. Yes, Amara agreed, but it's a trap that works both ways. He has to appear too in public in front of a judge. Marshal Cross, can you guarantee our safety at the courthouse? I can bring in more rangers, federal marshals even. But Mrs. Walker, you're gambling with your lives. We've been gambling since this started, she replied. At least now we know the stakes. The next days were spent in preparation. The cabin was fortified further, with Tom bringing in more men from neighboring counties who had their own grievances against Sullivan's network. Maria worked tirelessly to heal Miguel, who insisted he'd be ready to fight despite his shoulder wound. But it was Amara who surprised everyone with her strategic thinking. She sent Sarah and Catherine to Austin with copies of all their documents, ensuring evidence would survive even if they didn't. She had Cole write detailed accounts of everything that had happened, witnessed and notarized by Judge Morrison, who'd arrived to oversee the upcoming hearing. You're planning like you expect to lose, Cole observed one evening as she organized yet another set of papers. I'm planning for every possibility, she corrected. My grandmother survived slavery by being prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. It's a lesson that served me well. 3 nights before the hearing, their vigilance paid off. One of Tom's sentries spotted movement near the creek, not an attack force, but a single figure creeping toward the house. They captured him easily, and Cole recognized him as Hartley, the lawyer who'd drawn up the original marriage contract. Please, Hartley begged. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I need to talk to you. Sullivan's planning something terrible. They brought him inside, keeping him under guard. Hartley looked haggard, fear etched deep in his features. Sullivan's lost his mind, he said. The failed attack, the pressure from the Rangers, he's desperate. He's planning to blow up the courthouse during the hearing, kill everyone and blame it on Mexican revolutionaries. He's got dynamite professional miners from Colorado. Why tell us? Amara asked suspiciously. Because I never signed up for mass murder. I thought it was just about money land deals. But Sullivan, he'd rather see everything burn than lose. Hartley pulled out a map. The explosives are here in the old Wells building next to the courthouse. They're planning to detonate during the hearing when everyone's inside. Marshal Cross studied the map grimly. If this is true, we need to act immediately. It could be a trap, Cole warned. Hartley could be leading us into an ambush. Or he could be telling the truth, Amara said. And if he is, dozens of innocent people will die. The debate continued past midnight, but finally a plan emerged. They would send scouts to verify Hartley's information while maintaining security at the cabin. If explosives were found, the Rangers would handle it quietly to avoid panic. The next morning brought confirmation. Captain Hayes himself returned from town with news that they'd found the dynamite exactly where Hartley had said. The arrest of the miners led to a gunfight that left 2 more of Sullivan's men dead, but Sullivan himself remained at large. He knows we're onto him, Hayes reported. My guess is he'll make one last desperate play. He was right. That very evening, as the sun painted the sky crimson, Sullivan appeared on the ridge above their cabin. Not with an army, but alone, walking his horse slowly down toward them. Marshal Cross ordered everyone to hold fire. Sullivan stopped just outside rifle range, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. Walker, I'm calling you out, man to man. the way this should have been settled from the beginning. Don't be a fool, Cross warned Cole. He's desperate dangerous. But Cole was already checking his pistol. He's right about one thing. This started between us. Maybe it should end that way. Cole, no. Amara grabbed his arm. This isn't about honor or pride. Sullivan's a killer. And I'm the fool who got us into this mess. He gently removed her hand. I need to face him, Amara. Not for pride, but for peace. Otherwise, this never ends. She searched his face for a long moment, then surprised him by pulling him close and kissing him deeply. Not the brief formal kiss from their wedding, but something real passionate, desperate. You come back to me, she whispered against his lips. You hear me, Cole Walker. You come back to me alive. Cole walked out to meet Sullivan, very aware of the rifles trained on both of them from multiple directions. Sullivan had dismounted, standing in the dying light like a figure from a nightmare. Should have taken my offer, Sullivan said conversationally. Could have been rich free, starting over somewhere else. With blood money and shame, Cole replied. Rather be poor and honest. Honest? Sullivan laughed bitterly. You think you're honest? You're a drunk and a gambler who wagered a woman like property. You're no better than me. You're right, Cole admitted. I'm not a good man, but I'm trying to be better. And I've got someone who believes I can be. That's more than you'll ever have. Touching. But this isn't about redemption, Walker. This is about who's faster, who's meaner, who wants it more. Sullivan's hand hovered near his gun. On three? Cole nodded, his mouth dry. He could hear his heartbeat, feel the evening breeze, smell the lingering smoke from the burned barn. Time seemed to slow. 1, Sullivan counted. 2. He drew on 2, cheating as Cole had expected, but Cole was already moving, diving to the side as Sullivan's shot went wide. Cole's gun cleared leather, and he fired twice, both shots hitting center mass. Sullivan staggered, his gun falling from nerveless fingers. You were ready! Sullivan gasped, blood spreading across his white shirt. Amara taught me something, Cole said, standing over the dying man. Always be prepared for the worst. Sullivan laughed, a wet, horrible sound. The land, you don't even know. What's under? His eyes went vacant, the words dying with him. Cole stood there for a moment, feeling nothing but emptiness. He'd killed before in self-defense and war, but this felt different, final. Then Amara was there, pulling him into her arms, and the world came rushing back. The others surrounded them, cheering, but Cole only had eyes for his wife. It's over, he said. The killing's over, she corrected. The living, that's just beginning. The hearing went forward as scheduled, though, with a somber tone given recent events. Judge Morrison, not the gunman, but the circuit judge, reviewed all the evidence, including testimony from dozens of witnesses about Sullivan's crimes. The marriage contract was declared valid, but modified to remove any coercive elements. Cole and Amara's land claims were confirmed, and surprisingly, they were awarded Sullivan's seized assets as compensation for their ordeal. But the biggest surprise came from the geological survey Tom had commissioned. The mineral deposits Amara had noticed in the old documents weren't oil or silver. They were copper. Lots of it, enough to make them wealthy beyond imagining if properly mined. That's what Sullivan knew, Amara said, reading the report in amazement. He must have had private surveys done, knew what was here. We could be rich, Cole said, struggling to process the information. We could be, Amara agreed, or we could do something else. They were sitting on their rebuilt porch, watching the sun set over land that was now truly theirs. The past weeks had changed them both, weathered them like stones in a river, but also polished them into something stronger. What else could we do? We could create something lasting. A cooperative mine owned by all the families who stood with us. Shared prosperity instead of individual wealth. She looked at him. Your choice too, husband. This is our decision to make together. Husband. The word no longer felt like a chain, but a connection, a choosing. Cole considered their options, thought about Sullivan's greed and where it had led him, thought about the community that had rallied to their defense. Together, he said, we share it. Build something Sullivan never could, a place where everyone has a stake, everyone benefits. Amara smiled, that radiant expression that still took his breath away. I was hoping you'd say that. As the stars emerged overhead, they sat in comfortable silence, no longer strangers bound by a cruel bet, but partners who'd chosen each other through trial and fire. The road ahead would have its challenges, Cole knew. There would be those who questioned their marriage, their choices, their right to the prosperity they'd found. But they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. Miguel, his arms still in a sling, emerged from the cabin where he'd been recuperating. "Sorry to interrupt, but Maria's making dinner and wants to know if you'll join us." "We'll be right in," Amara said, but she didn't move from Cole's side. "You know," Cole said quietly, "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For being stronger than me. For showing me what courage really looks like. For turning the worst thing that ever happened to me into the best." Amara was quiet for a moment. "You want to know a secret. Always. That first day when you came to my farm to tell me about the bet I could have run. I had money saved, could have disappeared before the wedding, but when I saw you standing there so broken and ashamed, but still trying to do the right thing, I thought maybe, just maybe, something good could come from this disaster." "And did it?" She turned to face him fully, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Cole Walker, you frustrating, prideful, wonderful fool of a man. Can't you tell I love you? Not because I have to, not because of any contract, but because of who you've become, who we've become together." Cole kissed her, then pouring all his gratitude, admiration, and love into the connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I love you too," he said. "Have for a while now, just didn't know how to say it." "Well," Amara said with a slight smile, "you always were better with actions than words." They stood to go inside, but Cole paused, looking back at the land that had caused so much trouble and brought so much unexpected joy. "No regrets?" Amara asked. "Only one," Cole admitted. "I wish I'd lost that poker game sooner." Amara laughed, the sound carrying across the valley like a promise of better days ahead. Together, they walked into their home, where friends waited, where warmth and laughter pushed back the darkness, where a future neither had imagined was finally taking shape. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A delegation from Austin, including state representatives and mining company executives who'd heard about the copper discovery. They gathered in the yard, men in expensive suits looking out of place against the simple ranch setting. "Mr. Walker." "Mrs. Walker," the lead representative, a portly man named Whitman, began. "We're here to make you an offer. The state of Texas is interested in purchasing your mineral rights for a substantial sum, enough to make you wealthy for generations." "How substantial?" Cole asked, though he already knew their answer would be no. $50,000 cash. It was more money than Cole had ever imagined, enough to buy a dozen ranches to live in luxury for the rest of their lives. He felt Amara's hand slip into his, a silent reminder of their decision. "We appreciate the offer," Amara said smoothly, "but we've already made arrangements. We're forming a mining cooperative with our neighbors. The wealth will be shared among all the families who helped us." Whitman's face reddened. That's highly irregular. Mining requires expertise, capital investment, which we'll arrange through proper channels," Tom Bennett interrupted, stepping forward with several other neighbors. "We've already been in contact with reputable mining firms willing to work on a partnership basis." "You're making a mistake," another executive said. "Without state support." "The state didn't support us when Sullivan was terrorizing this county," Marcus Webb said firmly. "We'll manage fine on our own." The delegation left in a huff, but Cole noticed one younger man lingering behind. He introduced himself as James Hartwell, a mining engineer. "I think what you're doing is admirable," he said quietly. "If you need someone with experience to help set up operations, I'd be interested. Fair wages, no ownership stake required. I'd like to be part of something built on principle rather than greed." It was the beginning of something unprecedented in that part of Texas. A cooperative mine where profits were shared among 40 families, where decisions were made democratically, where men of different backgrounds worked side by side as equals. Not everyone approved. There were threats, attempts at sabotage, legal challenges from those who claimed such arrangements were socialist, un-American. But the cooperative endured, protected by the bonds forged in their fight against Sullivan, strengthened by shared purpose and mutual respect. Miguel, despite his injury, became the operational manager, his natural leadership and attention to detail making him perfect for the role. Tom Bennett handled negotiations with buyers, his connections and reputation opening doors that might have remained closed to others. And at the center of it all were Cole and Amara, the unlikely couple whose forced marriage had become a genuine partnership. They worked together seamlessly now, Cole managing the ranch and livestock operation that fed the mining families, Amara keeping the books, and managing the cooperative's finances with a skill that surprised everyone but Cole. One evening, 6 months after Sullivan's death, they hosted a celebration for the cooperative's first profit distribution. The yard was full of families, children running between tables laden with food, men and women who'd once been suspicious strangers, now laughing together like old friends. "Look what you built," Cole said to Amara as they watched from the porch. "What we built?" she corrected. "None of this would exist without both of us." Sarah Bennett approached carrying a baby in her arms. "Amara, I wanted you to meet someone. This is our daughter born last month. We named her Hope Amara Bennett, after the woman who showed us all what courage looks like." Amara's eyes filled with tears as she gently touched the baby's tiny hand. "She's beautiful, Sarah." "Takes after her namesake," Sarah said with a smile. As the evening wore on, stories were shared about the fight against Sullivan, already taking on the quality of legend. But Cole noticed Amara growing quiet, withdrawn. He found her later standing by the creek moonlight, silvering the water. "What's troubling you?" "I'm pregnant," she said simply. Cole's world tilted. We're going to have a baby." "Yes." She turned to face him, vulnerability clear in her expression. "I wasn't sure how to tell you. This changes everything." "It does," Cole agreed, pulling her into his arms. "It makes everything better. You're not worried about what people will say. A mixed child in Texas won't have an easy life." "No child of ours could have anything but strength in their blood," Cole said firmly. "And look around Amara. We've built a community here that judges people by their character, not their color. Our child will grow up surrounded by that." She leaned into him, and he felt her tears against his shirt. "I never thought I'd have this. A family, a home, a future I could believe in." "Neither did I. Funny how the worst bet I ever made turned into the best thing that ever happened to me." The baby was born the following spring, a daughter, with Amara's eyes and Cole's stubborn chin. They named her Elizabeth after Amara's grandmother, but everyone called her Liberty, a child born free in every sense of the word. The cooperative continued to thrive, becoming a model that other communities began to emulate. Writers came from Eastern newspapers to document this unusual experiment in shared prosperity, though their stories often focused more on the dramatic romance of Cole and Amara than the economic innovation they'd pioneered. "They make us sound like some kind of fairy tale," Amara complained one day, reading an article from a Philadelphia paper. "Aren't we?" Cole asked, bouncing Liberty on his knee. "A cowboy and a lady brought together by fate, fighting evil, finding love." "When you put it that way, it does sound rather storybook," Amara admitted, except for the part where the cowboy lost the lady in a poker game. "Details," Cole said with a grin. But their story was far from over. The success of the cooperative attracted attention from powerful interests who saw it as a threat to the established order. Railroad barons who'd counted on cheap, desperate labor mining conglomerates who viewed cooperative ownership as dangerous precedent, politicians who feared the political power of organized, prosperous communities. The attacks came in various forms: legal challenges to the cooperative's structure, attempts to buy out individual members, even efforts to stir racial tensions within the group. But the bonds forged in crisis held strong. When someone tried to burn Miguel's house, claiming Texas wasn't meant for Mexicans, the entire cooperative stood guard for weeks. When Eastern lawyers tried to prove the cooperative was illegal, Amara's meticulous record-keeping and Cole's testimony about their origins defeated every challenge. 3 years after Sullivan's death on their anniversary, the date of their forced marriage, which they'd reclaimed as their own, Cole surprised Amara with something unexpected. "What's this?" she asked, looking at the official-looking document he'd handed her. "A new marriage certificate," Cole explained. "I went to Judge Morrison and had our marriage re-performed. No force, no bet, no coercion, just us choosing each other freely." "Cole Walker," Are you proposing to me? I'm proposing we make it official on our own terms. What do you say? Mrs. Walker, will you marry me because you want to, not because you have to? The ceremony was small this time, just close friends and family held in the meadow where wildflowers grew thick. Liberty toddled down the aisle as flower girl throwing petals with enthusiastic abandon. When Reverend Mills asked if anyone objected, Tom Bennett stood up. I object to this taking so long, he said with a grin. These two have been married in every way that matters for years now. The laughter that followed was warm, genuine, so different from the mockery of their first wedding. When Cole kissed Amara this time, it was with the knowledge of all they'd survived, all they'd built, all they'd become together. Years passed. The cooperative mine eventually played out, but by then the community had diversified into ranching, farming, even small manufacturing. The principles they'd established, shared ownership, democratic decision-making, racial cooperation, became the foundation for a thriving county that defied the norms of its time. Cole and Amara had 3 more children, 2 boys and another girl, each one growing up in a world their parents had fought to create. The story of their beginning became family legend told with humor rather than shame. Papa really lost Mama in a poker game, young James would ask, wide-eyed with disbelief. He did, Amara would confirm. But what he doesn't tell you is that I won him right back through sheer stubbornness. Liberty's laughter echoed across the valley as she chased her younger brothers through the wildflowers, their childhood, untouched by the violence that had marked their parents' early days together. Cole watched from the porch. He'd rebuilt 3 times now, each iteration stronger than the last, much like his marriage to Amara. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, and in them he could almost see the ghosts of who they used to be, the broken gambler and the proud widow forced together by cruel circumstance. You're thinking about the old days again, Amara said, settling beside him with a grace that hadn't diminished despite bearing 4 children and working alongside him in the fields for over a decade. Hard not to sometimes, especially when I see how different their world is from what ours was. Before Amara could respond, a rider appeared on the horizon, spurring hard toward their ranch. Cole tensed from old habit, his hand moving toward where a rifle used to lean, though they hadn't needed such precautions in years. As the rider drew closer, he recognized young Timothy Morrison, son of the very man who'd once threatened to burn their home. Mr. Walker. Mrs. Walker. Timothy gasped, his horse lathered with sweat. You need to come to town. There's been trouble at the cooperative meeting. Cole and Amara exchanged glances. The monthly cooperative meetings had become routine affairs discussing crop rotations and equipment purchases rather than survival against common enemies. But Timothy's face suggested something far more serious. What kind of trouble? Amara asked, already moving toward the house to gather her things. There's a man from Dallas claims he has legal ownership of the original Sullivan holdings. Says our entire cooperative structure is built on fraudulent ground. He's got papers, lawyers, and... Timothy paused, swallowing hard. He's got Sheriff Watson with him. Watson's been in prison for 8 years, Cole said sharply. Released last month. This Dallas man calls himself Jefferson Blackstone, apparently pulled strings. Watson's wearing a deputy's badge from Dallas County now. The ride to town felt like traveling backward through time. Cole could feel the old tensions creeping back into his shoulders, see the way Amara's jaw set in that familiar, determined line. Their children were safe with Sarah Bennett, but Cole couldn't shake the feeling that their hard-won peace was about to shatter. The town square was packed when they arrived. At its center stood a man who could only be Jefferson Blackstone, tall, immaculately dressed, despite the Texas heat, with the kind of cold confidence that reminded Cole uncomfortably of Sullivan. Beside him, Watson looked older, meaner, his years in prison having stripped away any pretense of legitimacy. "Ah, the famous Walkers," Blackstone said as they pushed through the crowd. "I've heard so much about you, the gambler and his prize who built an empire on a dead man's stolen dreams." Sullivan was a criminal and a murderer, Tom Bennett said firmly from where he stood with the other cooperative members. Everything he had was built on fraud and intimidation. Perhaps, but I've purchased his debts, his claims, and most importantly, his documentation proving that the mineral rights to this entire region were obtained through Spanish land grants that supersede your American titles. Blackstone produced a leather portfolio thick with aged documents. Documents that Sullivan spent years collecting, which make me the rightful owner of not just the played-out mine, but the water rights, the grazing lands, and essentially everything your cooperative has built. That's impossible, Amara said, stepping forward. Those grants were invalidated by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Some were. Others were grandfathered, and especially those that had been properly transferred before the treaty. It's quite complex legally, which is why I've brought experts. He gestured to a group of serious-looking men in dark suits. Of course I'm willing to be reasonable. I'll allow the cooperative to continue operating as my tenants, paying 60% of all profits as rent. The crowd erupted in angry voices, but Cole noticed Watson's hand moving to his gun, noticed how several other hard-looking men were positioned strategically around the square. This wasn't just a legal challenge, it was a carefully orchestrated takeover. "We need time to review these documents," Judge Morrison said, having arrived from the courthouse. "This isn't something to be decided in the street." "Of course," Blackstone smiled coldly. "You have 1 week. After that, I'll expect either acceptance of my terms or vacation of my properties. Deputy Watson here will ensure everything remains orderly." As the crowd dispersed, Cole caught Watson's arm. "I don't care what badge you're wearing now. You come near my family." "You'll what?" Watson sneered. "Kill me like you killed Sullivan." "You got lucky once, Walker, but luck runs out. Ask anyone who's ever gambled." That night, the cooperative's leadership gathered in the same church where Cole and Amara had been married all those years ago. The mood was grim as they pored over Blackstone's documents by lamplight. "Some of these look authentic," Marcus Webb admitted reluctantly. "The seals, the signatures, if they're forgeries, they're excellent ones." "But how could Sullivan have kept these secret?" Miguel asked, his arm still slightly stiff from his old wound. "We went through everything after his death." "Unless he had a partner," Amara said suddenly. "Someone who kept the most valuable documents safe waiting for the right time to use them." "Blackwood," Cole breathed. "Samuel Blackwood. He turned state's evidence, but he was released after serving only 2 years. He'd know where Sullivan kept everything." "Even if that's true, it doesn't help us," Tom pointed out. "These documents, real or forged, will hold up in court long enough for Blackstone to destroy everything we've built." "Then we don't fight them in court," Amara said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "At least not just in court. We need to find proof that these documents are forgeries or that Blackstone obtained them illegally, and we need to find it fast." The next days were a whirlwind of activity, but conducted in secret. While Amara and Judge Morrison worked through the legal arguments, Cole and Tom rode to Dallas, seeking information about Jefferson Blackstone. What they found was troubling. The man was a speculator who'd made a fortune buying distressed properties and forcing out their occupants through legal manipulation. "He's Sullivan, with better clothes and worse morals," Tom observed as they sat in a Dallas saloon, having just spoken with a farmer who'd lost everything to Blackstone's schemes. "Sullivan at least had the decency to be obvious about his villainy," Cole agreed. "This man hides behind the law while breaking its spirit." Meanwhile, Amara had made a discovery of her own. Hidden in the church records in the same ledger where their marriage had been recorded was a note in Reverend Mill's careful handwriting, "S.B. confessed to forgery scheme before death. Documents hidden in old mission. May God forgive us all." S.B. Samuel Blackwood, Amara told the gathered cooperative members. "He must have confessed to Reverend Mills before he died last year. The Reverend couldn't break the seal of confession while Blackwood lived, but he left us a clue." The old Spanish mission was 20 miles north, abandoned for decades and supposedly haunted. Cole, Tom, Miguel, and several others rode out that night, finding the crumbling structure by moonlight. The search seemed hopeless until Miguel, remembering stories from his grandfather, found a hidden compartment behind the altar. Inside were documents, the real Spanish land grants, marked with notes in Sullivan's hand about how to alter them, along with practice forgeries and a detailed journal of the entire scheme. Most damning was a contract between Sullivan and Blackwood planning to fake Sullivan's death and resurface years later under a new identity to reclaim everything. Jefferson Blackstone. Cole read from one page. Sullivan was going to become Jefferson Blackstone, which means the man in town is either Sullivan himself or someone using his plan. Tom finished. They rode hard back to town, arriving just as dawn broke. But the scene that greeted them was chaos. Buildings were burning, gunshots echoed through the streets, and Watson stood in the square with a dozen armed men. "Where's my family?" Cole demanded, fear clawing at his throat. "Safe," Marcus Webb called from behind an overturned wagon. "Sarah got all the women and children to the church when the shooting started, but Blackstone's trying to force Judge Morrison to sign over the properties immediately." Cole could see Blackstone now standing on the courthouse steps with a gun to Judge Morrison's head. The man's composed mask had slipped, revealing something desperate and familiar underneath. "It is him," Amara said, appearing beside Cole with her rifle. "Look at his eyes." Sullivan's eyes. It seemed impossible, but as Cole studied the man's face, he could see it the same cold calculation, the same cruel twist to the mouth. Sullivan had somehow faked his death, spent years establishing a new identity, and returned to claim what he believed was his. "We have to stop him," Cole said. "How?" "He has hostages, armed men, and legal documents that most people will believe are real." "The same way we stopped him before," Amara said firmly. "Together." The battle that followed was different from their previous confrontations, less a gunfight than a careful siege. While Cole and the men kept Watson's gunmen pinned down, Amara and Catherine snuck through buildings with the evidence they'd found, getting it to the telegraph office, to wire to Austin, to federal marshals, to newspapers. The turning point came when young Timothy Morrison, seeking to prove himself, managed to get close enough to hear Blackstone talking to Watson. "I don't care about the legalities anymore," Blackstone was saying. "Burn it all. We'll claim the townspeople rioted, that we had to defend ourselves." Timothy's testimony, combined with the evidence from the mission, was enough. When federal marshals arrived the next day, summoned by Amara's telegrams, they found a town united in its testimony against the man claiming to be Jefferson Blackstone. The revelation of his true identity came during the trial. Fingerprints, a new scientific method the federal prosecutors brought from Washington, proved that Jefferson Blackstone was indeed Vince Sullivan. He'd paid a prison doctor to declare him dead, escaped during the chaos of a staged prison riot, and spent years in Mexico and California building his new identity. "You should have stayed dead," Cole told him as marshals led him away in chains. "I had won," Sullivan snarled. "That land, that wealth, it was mine, by right of intelligence of planning." "It was never yours," Amara interrupted. "It belonged to the people who worked it, who bled for it, who built something meaningful on it. All you ever built were schemes and lies." Sullivan's second trial was swift. This time there would be no escape, no resurrection. He was sentenced to life in federal prison, and Watson alongside him. The cooperative's claims were not only upheld, but strengthened with federal recognition that provided protection against future challenges. But the attack had changed things. The community realized that their experiment in cooperative ownership would always face threats from those who saw it as dangerous to the established order. They needed to be more than just an economic arrangement, they needed to be a political force. "We should run someone for state legislature," Sarah Bennett suggested at the next cooperative meeting. "Someone who understands what we've built here and can protect it through law rather than guns." All eyes turned to Amara. She tried to protest. A black woman in the Texas legislature was unthinkable, but the cooperative had already proven that the unthinkable was possible. The campaign that followed was unlike anything Texas had seen. Amara spoke at rallies throughout the county, telling the story of their community's transformation. Cole stood beside her, using his connections among the ranching community to build bridges. Their children traveled with them, living proof that the future they envisioned was already taking root. The opposition was fierce. Newspapers called it an abomination, religious leaders declared it against God's order, and more than once they faced violent crowds. But for every voice raised against them, two rose in support. Farmers tired of being cheated by speculators' wives who wanted a say in their community's futures. Young people who saw in the cooperative a different path forward. Election night found them all gathered at the ranch watching as results came in by telegraph. The race was close, closer than anyone had predicted. When the final count showed Amara had won by just 47 votes, the celebration was subdued, everyone aware of the weight of what had just happened. "You realize what this means," Cole said to Amara as they stood on their porch looking out at their gathered friends and family. "It means the fight's just beginning," she replied. But at least now we're fighting in the halls of power rather than in the streets. Her first day in Austin was a spectacle. Some legislators refused to be seated in the same room as her. Others made a point of welcoming her, seeing political advantage in appearing progressive. But Amara navigated it all with the same steady grace that had carried her through forced marriage violence and triumph. Her first successful bill was modest protection for agricultural cooperatives from predatory lending practices. But it opened doors for more ambitious legislation. Within 2 years, she'd helped pass laws protecting water rights for small farmers, establishing standards for mine safety, and most controversially ensuring that women could own property independently of their husbands. "You're changing too much too fast," a colleague warned her. "There'll be a backlash. There's always a backlash against justice," Amara replied. "That doesn't mean we stop pursuing it." The backlash came in the form of an assassination attempt. A shot fired during a speech in San Antonio missed Amara by inches, shattering the window behind her. Cole, who'd been standing in the crowd, tackled the shooter before he could fire again. The man turned out to be connected to a network of former Sullivan associates who'd never accepted their defeat. "Maybe we should step back," Cole suggested that night, holding Amara close in their hotel room. "We've done enough. Let others carry the torch now." "Would you have stepped back when Sullivan threatened us the first time?" "That was different. We were just protecting ourselves then." "No," Amara said firmly. "We were protecting the idea that people like us deserve better than what men like Sullivan offer. That idea is worth protecting, whether it's our own small ranch or the entire state of Texas." She was right, of course. She usually was. They continued the fight, though they took better precautions. Their children grew up understanding that their parents' work was dangerous but necessary, that the comfortable world they inhabited had been bought with courage and sacrifice. Liberty, their oldest, showed her mother's intelligence and her father's stubborn streak. At 18, she announced her intention to study law. "I want to make permanent what you and Mama built," she told Cole. "Write it into law so deeply that no Sullivan, no matter what name he uses, can ever tear it down." James and William. Their boys chose different paths. One toward agriculture, developing new farming techniques that would help the cooperative thrive, the other toward education, eventually establishing schools that welcome children of all backgrounds. Their youngest, Mary, surprised everyone by becoming a doctor, bringing modern medicine to communities that had never had access to proper health care. 25 years after that forced wedding, Cole and Amara renewed their vows again. This time, surrounded not just by their family and original allies, but by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by their work. The ceremony was held in the new courthouse built on the site where they'd fought Sullivan's men, with Liberty officiating as the county's youngest judge. "You know," Cole said to Amara as they danced at the reception, both graying now but still strong, "I've been thinking about that poker game. After all these years, I think maybe I didn't lose after all. Maybe I won exactly what I was supposed to." Amara laughed, the sound still capable of making his heart skip. "Cole Walker, are you saying fate meant for us to be together?" "I'm saying that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing if you're brave enough to see it through." "Or stubborn enough," Amara added with a smile. "That too." As they danced, Cole could see the threads of their influence spreading throughout the room. Former enemies, now friends, their children carrying forward their parents' work. Young couples inspired by their story to fight for their own unlikely dreams. The cooperative had evolved into something neither of them could have imagined, not just an economic arrangement, but a movement that was slowly transforming Texas from the ground up. Marcus Webb's son was now a state senator pushing for voting rights legislation. Maria Santana's daughter ran a network of cooperative stores that ensured fair prices for both producers and consumers. The grandson of one of Sullivan's hired guns was their doctor, having been inspired by Mary Walker's example to pursue medicine. "Do you ever regret it?" Amara asked as the music slowed. "The life we could have had if we'd taken Sullivan's money and run. What life would that have been? Running forever, looking over our shoulders, knowing we'd abandoned everything we believed in." Cole shook his head. "No, this life, our life, it's worth every fight, every scar, every sleepless night." The next morning brought news that would test their resolve once again. A telegram from Washington announced that the federal government was considering legislation that would break up cooperatives like theirs, claiming they were impediments to industrial progress. "Here we go again," Tom Bennett said, older now, but still ready to fight. "No," Amara said thoughtfully. "Not again. This time we don't just defend what we have. This time we take the fight to them." Within a month, Amara had organized a delegation to Washington, not just from their cooperative, but from dozens of others that had sprung up across the South and West, inspired by their example. Cole watched with pride as his wife stood before Congress, no longer the widow forced into marriage, but a force of nature shaped by struggle into something unbreakable. "You ask us to dissolve our cooperatives in the name of progress," she told the assembled legislators. "But progress toward what? Toward a world where a few men own everything and the rest own nothing. We've seen that world. We've fought that world. And we've built something better, not perfect, but better. Communities where every family has a stake, where children grow up knowing their labor means something, where the color of your skin or the circumstances of your birth don't determine your worth. That's progress. What you're proposing is just another form of the bondage we've spent our lives breaking." The legislation failed by 3 votes. Those 3 votes came from legislators who'd been moved by the stories of cooperative members, by the evidence of prosperity and stability in cooperative communities, and perhaps most of all by the sight of Cole and Amara Walker standing together, living proof that the most unlikely partnerships could produce the most extraordinary results. On the train ride home from Washington, Cole found Amara standing in the observation car watching the country roll by. "What are you thinking about?" "The future. Liberty's engaged to that young lawyer from Houston. Did you know? The Brennan boy, good family. His father helped us with the Washington legislation. A black woman marrying an Irish Catholic. 25 years ago, that would have caused riots. 25 years ago, a black woman married a broken white gambler and turned it into this." Cole gestured at the landscape dotted with prosperous farms and growing towns, many of them influenced by their cooperative model. "Maybe our grandchildren will live in a world where it doesn't matter at all." "Maybe," Amara agreed, leaning into his embrace. "Though I suspect they'll have their own battles to fight." She was right as usual. But their children and grandchildren would face those battles with advantages Cole and Amara never had. Education, community support, legal frameworks that protected rather than oppressed, and most importantly, the knowledge that seemingly impossible victories were achievable with courage, determination, and unity. The attacks continued over the years, taking different forms: economic downturns that tested the cooperative's resilience, political movements that sought to reverse their gains, personal tragedies that threatened to break their spirits. Through it all, Cole and Amara stood together, their partnership deepening with each challenge, until it was impossible to say where one ended and the other began. Cole lived to see his first great-grandchild, a boy whose mixed heritage represented 4 different continents and whose birth certificate listed him simply as American. He held the baby while sitting on the same porch where he'd once slept on the floor, too ashamed to share a bed with the woman he'd won in a poker game. "What are you thinking about, Grandpa Cole?" Liberty asked. Now a grandmother herself, her judge's robes replaced with a simple dress for the family gathering. "How a bad bet became the best hand I ever played," he said, watching Amara across the yard, still organizing, still fighting, still magnificent in her 70s. "You should tell him the story when he's older," Liberty suggested. "Which version, the one where I was a fool who got lucky, or the one where your mother was a queen who saved us all?" "Both," Liberty said. "Tell him both. Let him know that heroes aren't perfect, that love isn't always pretty, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the beginning of everything good." Cole died on a Tuesday morning in early spring, exactly 50 years after he'd lost that poker game. He went peacefully holding Amara's hand, surrounded by 4 generations of family in the same room where they'd first truly become husband and wife. His last words were characteristic of the man he'd become. "Take care of each other. Fight for what's right. And Amara, thank you for saving me." The funeral drew thousands, not just from their county, but from across Texas and beyond, people whose lives had been touched by the movement Cole and Amara had started. The governor spoke, as did senators and judges, but it was Liberty who captured the essence of her father's transformation. Cole Walker was proof that redemption isn't just possible, it's powerful, she said, standing at the pulpit of the church where her parents had been forced to marry. He went from losing my mother in a poker game to being her greatest champion, from a broken gambler to a pillar of his community, from a man drowning in shame to someone who lifted others from their own despair. Amara sat in the front pew, her face composed but her eyes reflecting 5 decades of memories. Beside her sat James, now a renowned agricultural scientist whose work fed millions, William, who'd established schools across 3 states, Mary, whose medical innovations had saved countless lives, and Liberty, whose legal precedents had protected cooperative communities nationwide. After the burial, as mourners gathered at the ranch, Amara found herself standing on the porch where she and Cole had spent so many evenings. The original cabin had been expanded over the years into a sprawling home that regularly hosted community meetings, political gatherings, and family celebrations. But the core remained those original walls that had witnessed their transformation from strangers to partners to soulmates. "Grandmother," a voice interrupted her reverie. It was Marcus Liberty's eldest son, recently graduated from law school. "There's someone here to see you, says it's important." The visitor was an elderly woman, well-dressed but walking with a cane, her face vaguely familiar. It wasn't until she spoke that Amara recognized her. "Mrs. Walker, I'm Elizabeth Sullivan, Vince Sullivan's daughter." The porch fell silent. Family members tensed, ready to protect their matriarch from whatever threat this might represent. But Amara raised her hand, studying the woman before her. "I know who you are. You were a child when everything happened. What brings you here?" Elizabeth Sullivan's eyes filled with tears. "I came to apologize and to thank you." "Thank me." "For stopping him. My father he was a monster. What he did to you, to Mr. Walker, to this community, I've spent my entire adult life trying to make amends for it. I've followed your work, your family's achievements. You built something beautiful from something horrible, and I needed you to know that not all Sullivans were like him." Amara was quiet for a long moment, then gestured to a chair. "Sit. Tell me about your life." The story that emerged was one of parallel redemption. Elizabeth had used her inheritance, what remained after the trials and settlements, to fund schools for disadvantaged children, to support cooperative businesses, to quietly undo some of the damage her father had caused. She'd never married, dedicating her life to service as a form of penance for sins that weren't hers, but which she felt responsible for nonetheless. "You didn't need to carry his guilt," Amara said gently. "Children aren't responsible for their parents' choices. But we inherit the consequences of them, just as your children inherited the benefits of your courage." They talked until sunset, 2 old women bound by a history neither had chosen, but both had transformed. When Elizabeth finally rose to leave, Amara surprised everyone, including herself, by embracing her. "Your father tried to break us," Amara said, "but his failure led to our greatest success. In a strange way, we owe him a debt for showing us what we were capable of when pushed to our limits. That's more grace than I deserve to hear." Grace is never about deserving. It's about choosing to break cycles of hatred. You've spent your life doing that. So have we. After Elizabeth left, Amara gathered her family around her. The ranch was full of people, not just blood relatives, but the extended family of the cooperative people whose parents and grandparents had stood with Cole and Amara against Sullivan, against Blackstone, against every attempt to destroy what they'd built. "Your grandfather would have wanted me to tell you something." Amara began, her voice still strong despite her age. "He always said the poker game was the worst thing that ever happened to him until it became the best. But that transformation didn't happen by accident. It happened because we chose every day to make something better from something broken." Young Samuel Mary's son, who'd just started medical school, asked, "But how did you forgive him, grandmother, for gambling you away like property?" Amara smiled, the expression holding decades of wisdom. "Forgiveness wasn't a single moment, Samuel. It was 1,000 small choices. Every time Cole stood up for me, every time he fought beside me, every time he chose our family over his pride, those were the moments forgiveness grew. By the time we renewed our vows the first time, I wasn't forgiving the man who'd lost me in a poker game. I was choosing the man who'd helped me win everything that mattered." The weeks following Cole's funeral were difficult, But Amara found strength in purpose. The cooperative was facing new challenges. Industrial agriculture companies trying to buy out members, political movements seeking to reverse decades of progress, climate changes affecting crop yields. At 81, she could have stepped back. Let the younger generation handle it. Instead, she dove deeper into the work. "You should rest, Mama," William urged during one of his visits. "You've done enough. Your father never rested when there was work to be done. Neither will I." She spent her days mentoring young activists, her evenings writing memoirs that would become required reading in Texas history classes, her nights dreaming of coal and waking with tears on her cheeks but determination in her heart. The work was what kept her connected to him, to the life they'd built, to the future they'd envisioned. 6 months after Cole's death, a crisis emerged that threatened everything. A multinational corporation, Allied Agricultural Holdings, had been quietly buying debts and liens throughout the county. Their plan, revealed through documents leaked by a whistleblower, was to force a mass foreclosure that would give them control of the entire cooperative's assets. "It's Sullivan all over again," Tom Bennett's son Robert said at an emergency meeting. "Different name, same tactics." "No," Amara corrected. "Sullivan was personal greed. This is systematic corporate colonization. It's bigger, more dangerous, and it requires a different response." The fight that followed was unlike any they'd faced before. It wasn't about gunfights or forged documents, but about complex financial instruments, international trade agreements, and corporate law. Liberty led the legal battle, using every precedent she'd established over her career. James organized the agricultural resistance, showing how corporate farming would destroy the land within a generation. William mobilized educational institutions to study and publicize the threat. Mary turned her medical network into a communication system that spread awareness across the state. But it was Amara who delivered the killing blow. In her research for her memoirs, she'd discovered something everyone had forgotten. The original Spanish land grants that Sullivan had tried to forge contained a provision that had never been legally challenged. The land could only be sold to entities that would maintain its agricultural use for the benefit of the local community. Any attempt to industrialize or corporatize it would revert ownership to the original grant holder's descendants. Which means, Amara explained to a packed courthouse, that Allied Agricultural Holdings can buy all the paper they want. But the moment they try to implement their industrial farming plan, ownership reverts to the descendants of the original Spanish settlers, many of whom are members of our cooperative. The legal battle took 2 years, going all the way to the Texas Supreme Court. Amara testified multiple times, her presence a reminder of the human cost of corporate greed. At 83, she stood for 6 hours of questioning, never wavering, never faltering. Her mind still sharp as the blade that had once cut through Sullivan's schemes. When the court ruled in the cooperative's favor, establishing what became known as the Walker Precedent, protecting agricultural communities from corporate takeover, Amara was too exhausted to celebrate. Liberty found her sitting in Cole's old chair on the porch, looking out at the land they'd protected once again. "We won, Mama. Your father would be proud," Amara said softly. "He always said the land would outlive us all. We just had to make sure it stayed in the right hands." That night, Amara had a dream. She was young again, standing in her garden the day Cole had come to tell her about the bet. But this time, instead of the broken, shameful man she remembered, Cole appeared as he'd been at the end, confident, kind, devoted. "Would you do it again?" Dream Cole asked. "Knowing everything that would come." "Every moment," Dream Amara replied. "Even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. They made us who we became." She woke to find her great-grandchildren playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. Marcus was teaching them the story of the cooperative using the same words she'd used to teach him. The continuity of it, the persistence of their legacy across generations filled her with a peace she hadn't felt since Cole's death. The next year brought recognition she'd never sought, but couldn't refuse. The President of the United States came to Texas to present Amara with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The citation read, "For transforming personal injustice into collective justice, for proving that America's highest ideals can flourish in its most unlikely soil, and for a lifetime of service that turned a forced marriage into a force for change." Standing at the podium wearing the medal, Cole would have been so proud to see her receive. Amara spoke not of her own achievements, but of the community that had made them possible. 51 years ago, I was a widow, forced to marry a gambler who'd lost me in a poker game. Today, I stand here as testament to the fact that America's greatness lies not in its perfect origins, but in its capacity for transformation. Cole Walker and I didn't start as heroes. We started as victims of a cruel man's game. But with the help of neighbors who became family enemies, who became allies, and children who became leaders, we built something that no corporate entity, no corrupt politician, no force of greed can destroy: a true community. The applause was thunderous, but Amara barely heard it. She was thinking of Cole, of how he would have stood slightly behind her, proud but uncomfortable with the attention, his hand on her shoulder, in that gentle way that said more than words ever could. Her health began to decline after that. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had carried so much for so long. She moved slower, tired, easier, but her mind remained sharp and her will unbroken. She spent her remaining time ensuring the cooperative's future, establishing legal trusts that would protect it for generations, creating educational endowments that would train future leaders, writing letters to each of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren with wisdom they wouldn't understand until they needed it. On a morning very much like the one when Cole had died, Amara felt the change coming. She called her children to her bedside, their faces reflecting the same mixture of grief and gratitude she'd felt at Cole's passing. "Tell me the story yet," she said to Liberty. "Tell me how it really began." Liberty smiled through her tears. Once upon a time, a foolish cowboy lost a bet and was forced to marry a black widow. Everyone thought it was the end of both their lives. But it wasn't, James continued. It was the beginning of something no one could have imagined. They fought a corrupt banker, William added. They built a cooperative that changed Texas. They raised children who changed the world, Mary said softly. And they loved each other, Amara whispered. Despite everything, because of everything, they loved each other with a depth that only comes from choosing each other every day, especially the hard days. She closed her eyes, and in her mind she was young again, standing in that church facing Cole Walker for the first time as his wife. But this time she could see the future stretching before them, all the fights, all the triumphs, all the quiet moments that built a love stronger than circumstances. "Thank you," she said, though whether to her children or to Cole's memory, no one could say. Amara Johnson Walker died at sunset exactly 50 years and 6 months after being forced to marry a broken gambler, having transformed that cruel bet into a legacy that would outlive them all. The funeral was even larger than Cole's had been. The president attended, as did governors from 3 states, senators, judges, and thousands of ordinary people whose lives had been touched by the Walkers' courage. But the most moving tribute came from an unexpected source. Elizabeth Sullivan, now 93 and in a wheelchair, had asked to speak. "My father tried to destroy them with cruelty," she said, her voice still clear despite her age. "But Cole and Amara Walker did something miraculous. They transformed that cruelty into kindness, that injustice into justice, that forced union into the greatest love story Texas has ever known. They proved that we are not doomed to repeat our parents' sins, that we can choose to be better, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to us is actually preparation for the best thing we'll ever do." Liberty stood to give the final eulogy, looking out at the sea of faces that represented every thread of her parents' influence. "My parents' story began with a poker game where my father lost and my mother was the prize. It ended with them winning everything that mattered: dignity, respect, love, and the knowledge that they had made the world better than they found it. But here's what they always wanted you to know. Their story isn't unique. Every one of us faces moments where we can choose bitterness or beauty, revenge or redemption, isolation or community. They chose beauty, redemption, and community, and they did it together." She paused, looking at the 2 coffins side by side. They had decided to bury Amara next to Cole where they belonged. "The poker game was rigged, but my parents won anyway. They won by refusing to play by Sullivan's rules, by writing their own, by turning a marriage of force into a force for change. And that's their real legacy. The proof that love isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose, something you build, something you fight for every single day." As the sun set over the Texas hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the crowd began to disperse. But the cooperative members stayed forming a circle around the graves, their hands joined in a human chain that stretched across the cemetery. They sang the old songs, the ones from the early days, when survival wasn't certain, when Sullivan's shadow loomed large, when a forced marriage between a white gambler and a black widow was the scandal of the county. Now that scandal had become scripture, that forced marriage had become the foundation of a movement, and Cole and Amara Walker had become proof that sometimes the worst bet you ever make turns out to be the hand that wins you everything. Marcus Liberty's son, now a judge himself, stood with his own children as the last of the crowd departed. His daughter, little Amara, named for her great-great-grandmother, tugged at his robes. "Papa, was it really true? Did great-great-grandpa really lose great-great-grandma in a poker game?" Marcus picked her up, looking at the two headstones that bore simple inscriptions. Cole's read, "He learned to win by losing everything." Amara's read, "She taught us that strength and grace are the same thing." "Yes, little one, it's true. But here's what you need to understand. Losing that game was the first step in winning something much bigger." "What did they win?" Marcus gestured to the land around them, the prosperous farms, the thriving town, the diverse crowd of mourners who'd come to pay their respects. They won the future, our future, and they won it not with cards or luck, but with courage, determination, and love. "Will you tell me the whole story?" "Every bit of it," Marcus promised. "The good and the bad, the struggles and the triumphs. Because that's what your great-great-grandparents would want for you to know, that greatness doesn't come from perfect beginnings, but from the choice to make something better from whatever hand you're dealt." As they walked away, the setting sun cast long shadows across the graves, and for just a moment, if you looked at just the right angle, you could see two figures standing together, hands clasped, looking out over the land they'd saved, and the legacy they'd built proof eternal, that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is just the beginning of the best story ever told. The cooperative still stands today, a testament to their vision. The original cabin has been preserved as a museum, with Amara's garden restored and Cole's workshop maintained exactly as he left it. School children come to learn about the poker game that changed Texas, about the couple who turned humiliation into hope, about the community that proved cooperation could triumph over corruption. In the museum's main room hangs a painting commissioned by their grandchildren. It shows Cole and Amara as they were at the end, elderly, weathered, but unbowed, standing on their porch, with their family spread out before them like a living garden. But if you look closely at the painting, you can see reflected in their eyes the young couple they'd been, the broken gambler, and the proud widow forced together by cruelty, choosing to stay together for love. Below the painting, a plaque bears the words Amara spoke at their last anniversary celebration. "We were not meant to be together. We were forced to be together. But somewhere between force and choice, between the worst thing and the best thing, we found each other. And finding each other, we found ourselves. And finding ourselves, we found the strength to change our world." The story of Cole and Amara Walker has been told in books and films, studied in universities, cited in legal precedents. But in the end, it remains what it always was, a love story. Not the pretty kind where everything goes right, but the real kind where everything goes wrong, until two people decide to make it right together against all odds for always. The poker game that started it all has become legend. The forced marriage that shocked everyone has become inspiration, and Cole and Amara Walker have become proof that sometimes, just sometimes, when you lose everything, you win it all back and more. Not through luck or chance, but through the daily choice to transform cruelty into kindness, injustice into justice, and a forced marriage into a force of nature that changed the world. Their graves lie side by side in the Texas earth they fought to protect, but their real monument isn't in stone. It's in every cooperative that treats workers fairly, every interracial couple that loves freely, every person who chooses to transform their worst moment into their best self. Cole Walker lost a poker game and won a legacy. Amara Johnson was forced into marriage and chose to make it meaningful. Together they proved that the house doesn't always win. Sometimes if you're brave enough and stubborn enough and lucky enough to find the right partner, you can break the house, rebuild it better, and invite everyone in. The last entry in Amara's journal, found after her death, read simply, "Cole always said he was sorry for that poker game, I never told him the truth that I thanked God every day for his foolishness. Because without that lost bet, that forced marriage, that disaster of a beginning, we never would have discovered what we were capable of together. We never would have known that two broken people could build something whole, that a forced union could become an unbreakable bond, that the worst thing that happens to you might just be the prologue to the best story you'll ever live. And so it was. And so it remains. In a small Texas town, two graves lie side by side, marking the end of a story that began with a rigged poker game and ended with a revolution of the heart. Cole and Amara Walker, the gambler, and the widow, the fool, and the queen. Proof eternal that love isn't about perfect beginnings, but about the choice to create perfect endings together, no matter how imperfect the start.